have access to it. Okay, welcome to the UPC Frontera to Cristo Mission Experience Trip Reflection. 2 weeks ago, Shelley asked God's blessing on our delegation as we traveled to the borderland. We went to Douglas and then to Agua Prieta, which is in Mexico, for those of you who don't know. We left on Saturday right after the men's breakfast, and we returned on Wednesday just in time for Carol to make it to bell choir. Just in time. Slide, please.
Just a second.
Okay.
Slide up there.
I'm going to keep talking and then I'll show you some pictures. Okay, how's that?
There you go.
So 11 of us participated in this trip, and you're going to hear from each one of us this morning. We had Catherine and Dan. We had Tom Best and Marge Colley, Kathy Wagner and her husband Al, Bianca, Jean Luce, Carol Rickle, and me and Rick. That was our group. And this is a picture that Rick took of the border wall. And then he put it, he just took the color out of it. This trip came about as a result, after I went on a very similar trip a year ago, October, with the Presbyterian women in the United States Mission Experience trip. And I talked to you about that in January with my friend Dodie, who went with me. That trip, as I mentioned then, was life-changing for me. And the first thing I said to Catherine when I came back was, we need to get more UPC people down there to see what's happening at Frontera. They need to see it for themselves. So we all hear stories from Catherine and from Dan, and Dan's written many articles, as Catherine has too, for our newsletter. We hear the stories often. And whenever we're asked to donate, we chip in. If they need donation supplies, whatever, we chip in. But to see Frontera partnerships in action and to hear their words of inspiration is a completely different experience. So we here at UPC have a really close connection with Frontera to Cristo. Catherine is on the board, and Jean Sayo is also on the board. Suya, I'm sorry, I always say your name wrong. Tsunami. So Jean is also on the board, and she has been worshiping with us. She's from the Douglas Church. But it takes seeing it to truly try to get an understanding of the incredible work that is being done. So this delegation was co-sponsored by our UPC Presbyterian Women's Group and our UPC Mission Social Justice Peacemaking Committee. We co-sponsored this group. All the women were Presbyterian women and participate in our PW. And we had maybe 5 of us are part of MSJP, 4 anyway. 4? 1, 2. Dan. Okay. So this was a co-sponsored group. Our focus was to experience for ourselves what, one, life is like on the border, and what it's like to live on the border between Arizona and Mexico, and what the Presbyterian Border Ministry, Frontera to Cristo, does, and the partners that they work with, and who they provide the humanitarian services for and with along the border region. So, next slide. This was our group at lunch last Saturday afternoon. This is the 11 of us. We stopped for lunch in Tucson. Next slide. The group spent several months actually preparing for this trip. We didn't just say, okay, who's going? Okay, we're going to go on this day and let's get there. We actually spent a lot of time preparing for this trip. And one of the first things that we did was we selected some scriptures to kind of focus our perceptions and what we wanted to keep in our minds as we experienced life at the border. Our first scripture was Matthew 23:23. The most important matters of the law are justice, peace, and faith. Our next scripture we chose was James 3:17 and 18. What of the wisdom from above? First, it is pure, and then peaceful, gentle, obedient, filled with mercy and good actions, fair and genuine. Those who make peace sow the seeds of justice by their peaceful acts. We took those two scriptures and then we said, why are we going? What do we want to get out of this trip? What is our focus? What is our mission statement? And we came up with a mission statement, and this is what we came up with. In faith and embracing holy wisdom, we are seeking community, justice, and to follow our God, to go, to witness, to build relationships, to experience, to share, to invite, and to be invited. Now you're going to hear from those of us who went on the trip, and we're going to share some photos that were taken along the way.
Okay, so Frontera de Cristo is not just a simple ministry organization on the border. First, it's related to other border ministries across the southern border between 4 states and Mexico. Today, at this point, I think there are 4 ministries that have survived. Initially, there were 6, and then for a while, 7. So that's our situation. It was from the very beginning, 1984, one of the first ones, and it was designed to be a binational border ministry. The idea, the concept of this grew out of a relation between the 2 denominations, Mexico's Presbyterian denomination and the PCUSA. And there was another one, the PCUS, I think. And they were just at the point where they were starting to get together. And I would love to spend hours telling you the history, but I'm going to stop there. The way that it's set up, because it's binational, it needs to have a co-director. So there's a director who is assigned by PCUSA to serve in the United States, for the United States, and then there's a director assigned by Mexico. And currently, you all have met both of the directors. Mark Adams has been here and preached here, and then Jocabet Gallegos has been here and preached here, and before her, her father had been the co-director of Frontera de Cristo, and also served the Lily of the Valley Church in Agua Prieta. So there's these 2 leadership folk, but they also are run by Frontera de Cristo as a nonprofit, a 501c3 in the United States, and the equivalent of a 501c3 in Mexico. So that those 2 organizations are both have little management people involved, and then they work collectively to make decisions. But you need to have both in order to run the organization. There is a binational board, so Jean and I both serve on that board. Luckily, she likes to do numbers, so she helps manage a little, because it's a complicated little group. So between us and then a few other people from the US, and then there are people who serve on the board from Mexico as well, and are part of what it's called Asociación Civil, so civil association is their 501c3. And pastor people, and then of course Mark and Hoka are always present at those. Okay, Frontera de Cristo has a lot of partners and programs that they engage in on a daily basis. And when you are a guest, part of a delegation, then you can visit all or most, and we didn't get them all visited, but we had I gave them a list of everything practically. Forgot Café Justo, if you can believe that, so they didn't get an official tour of Café Justo, but we were packed. We were doing experiences on the border, and then experiences in the desert, and then experiences on a vigil, and then eating dinner with church. And I mean, it just was like, there was so much that we had planned into our schedule that we would, I'm probably stepping on something else, but we would meet every night and just sort of debrief. And so, who was it? I think it was Marge. It comes her turn to say something, she just goes like this, because there was so much feeling, activity, experiences of meeting people, just seeing where we were was a lot. And so, which was why we wanted to debrief, but it also was pretty overwhelming. All right, so we all know about Café Justo, and it's been around since 2002, and it was the brainchild of Frontera de Cristo, and they worked with farmers in Chiapas to figure out, why are all these people coming to the border? They were all showing up in Agua Prieta. What was going on? And they found out, of course, that they couldn't make a living off of coffee production where they lived, so they had to send family north to make money. So it was an economic migration move on their part, and now people are living on their land and producing coffee, and we're drinking it today as my cup is right there. So it really offers a lot of stability to that community, and it also does things like, Dan knows more about this than I do, but in the community they now have water purification that's available for anybody who lives there. The children are now going to school instead of working in the fields. So there's education is starting to happen in a significant way for the community. So it makes a big difference. It's making a big difference to have people stay home. Then they decided to build a little cafe. So they have their own version of Starbucks or one of those. And it's a delightful place to go. It's cavernous, but we figured out that every building in Agua Prieta is cavernous, and so it's hard to understand the Spanish. Anyway, but Café Justo y Más, so it's Café Justo and more, and they opened as a coffee shop and community center. And so people can come in there, they have karaoke night, groups meet in there. There was some wedding thing going on while we were there. I don't know, did anybody ever figure out what that was? Graduation. That was graduation, not, wow. Well, they looked like they were going to a big fancy wedding. Anyway, so there you go. And they were there, and they were having events and stuff at that place. They increase the sales of coffee there in Agua Prieta. And it's used, Cartel drives up, and one of their folks get out and come up and get coffee for whoever's in the back of the car. But it's also a safe space where people can go and they can meet. Business people are meeting in there all of the time. And it's a lot of times when you walk in, there's a friend. You just know there's going to be a friend. Lily of the Valley Church, it's the oldest Presbyterian church in Sonora, Mexico. And it was formed a year after I don't know how do you say that. Anyway, they started up. They weren't planted as a building right away, but it was formed a year after Frontera de Cristo started, so in -- and they've been growing and building all along. That's where we lived when we were there. So we stayed in bunks, and Rick is the hero. He's the one who, where are you, Rick? Oh, he's the only one of our group who climbed up on a top bunk. Everybody else figured out how to get a bottom bunk while we were there. Anyway, so they were comfortable. We were okay, unless you had to go up and down. The food was incredible. We had breakfast, lunch, dinner served all the time. And sometimes by the people at the church at Lily of the Valley. But it is one of their partners. They are now partners. It was started by Frontera, but it's its own church in the presbytery there. So let me see, CATSIC. I looked all over to try to find what that acronym is. So it's CATPSIC. So the C is probably Centro, and the P stands for psychiatric. So psychiatric services that they offer there. CATSIC is a drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility. It's a live-in, so the people come in and they stay. They cannot leave. They're not allowed to leave, actually, for the early part of their work there to try to get clean. we had an opportunity to work with CATSIC, and you'll hear more about that later. They are also a partner, and they've been around since 2004, and have been a partner almost from the very beginning. The person who founded the place and ran it was a substance abuser, clean, but and he was able to come up with a program and get support, some support from the city. When Frontera started partnering with them, it was, I mean, how do you do that? How do you partner with, and they figured out ways to work together and serve each other. It wasn't just Frontera fixing those people. They served us. The Shalom House used to be there. It was a home that had been purchased by a Mennonite couple. We did have a chance to just sort of see them across the room at church, but they ran the Shalom House and made it available for anybody who said, may we have a place to stay. They don't turn you down unless their inn is full, no matter who you are. So homeless people could go up and knock on their door. Jack and Linda Knox, amazing people, they just sold their Shalom House. So there's New Hope, Nueva Esperanza, and that is a community center. It's basically, it was designed a long time ago to be located out in a community where there still were all dirt roads and so forth. And they now house, in particular, a program called, it's an education enrichment program that grew out of the obvious loss to children when COVID happened. They couldn't go out, but they didn't have cell phones and they couldn't connect either. So when children in Mexico, or at least in this area, don't have anything to do because school's not keeping them engaged, they're gonna start working with the cartel, and they do. I mean, they have runners that are this big. Let me see. The Children Enrichment Program has 4 sites, and one of the sites was located at Douglas Prieta Trabaja, which is Douglas Agua Prieta Work. And it's a women's cooperative, and one of the buildings on the site, it's fairly new, is one of the sites for the Children Enrichment Program. So kids who are in school there in that community can come there after school or before school. So they have like a split schedule, and the kids come in the morning or the afternoon, depending on what's happening in their schools. The Douglas Prieta Trabaja is a garden that individual women can have a plot of their own, or you can work collectively. They also do a lot of fabric, make beautiful pieces. We've had them here last year.
There's some
Apron and a bag.
Oh, an apron, yeah, purse. They do some beautiful stuff. You remember the little ladybug? Some people had those. There were little ladybug pot holders. Anyway, they're cute as can be. They're a lovely group of people, and there were 7 or 8 women, 7, 8, anybody remember? 8 women who run the shelter, but they also teach a lot, and they provide opportunities for others to come in and learn how to sew and how to cook. My favorite memory was when I was there with a group of college-age kids from a church, and there were women who were nursing while they were there. I mean, you know, because that's the normal, natural thing to do, and those kids just absolutely did not know what to do about it. They had to debrief about that one. They also partner with Healing Our Borders Vigil, which is an ecumenical organization, loosely organized, that come together every single Tuesday for the last 20 plus years to lift up the names of people who have died on the, in Cochise County. And finally, CAME, the Migrant Resource Center is situated right on the border, and some of this is in your handouts, but they're situated right on the border. Right now, they had nothing to do. People were not coming back into Mexico. Needless to say, they're worried about what's coming next, and so but what can they do until something starts happening? So they'll let us know when things start happening if they need assistance. Then there's, yes?
People not coming back into Mexico means that all those that are able to get across are going through the regular process here in the United States.
Yeah, there might be a few who, no, not necessarily. So for the people who are crossing now, there are none who are gaining asylum in Agua Prieta coming into Douglas. So if they're pushing people back, it's either because they were picked up someplace else and then were pushed back in, or they got picked up there and then they were put, but they now staff it for 12 hours during the day, like 8 to 8. They used to staff it 24 hours a day because there were people coming across, as particularly in the middle of the night. And that's the way it's been at the border. Lots, and then nothing, and then lots, and different. It's different every time. So they just sort of hang in there and they flex with whatever's going on. Then there's Kame, which is a shelter where people can live. While we were there, there were 2 families who were in residence there waiting for whatever the thing is. I forget the name of it. Say it again. CPB1 app. So they're waiting to get information about their meeting to be able to then come across legally. And so they were just living there and waiting there. And it's a site that's very protected. It's locked up. The cartel is paying attention, but they're not breaking in because it's on a Catholic church property. So it is definitely locked. I mean, big metal doors, no handles on them. But a mural, I mean, there's everywhere too. So I think that's it, unless I could just say that when SB 1070 happened, Douglas became a welcoming city. I mean, they titled themselves that. I don't know if that was happening all over the country. It was. But they became a welcoming city. And they have partnered with Frontera de Cristo regularly. And then so has the city of Agua Prieta. So they all are working together. Yes.
When they found all those people that were critically ill and everything, is that where we helped? You know, some they brought to the United States, but the others stayed behind when they were in that truck or something?
Oh, that happened probably quite a bit. But what I know about what happens if you have entered the United States without documentation and you have not asked for, that was before, I mean, now it's different again, but if you aren't getting asylum for whatever reason, you are given minimal amount of health care that you might need, broken leg, whatever, and then you're pushed right back into Mexico. That's the way the Border Patrol tells it.
So I'm going to talk a little bit, just a couple of minutes about migration, but I just want to remind everybody, since we're recording this, if you have questions, the audience needs to hear that, so let's get it on the microphone and then answer the question. So I've lived in Arizona all my life, and I have never thought of migration in the way that I thought I was, I guess it was brought up to me on this trip. One of the things that the experience of this was understanding how others live and taking me out of my comfort zone, but thinking how fortunate I am with what I have. So next slide, please. So we were talking with Miriam, who is Mark Adams' wife, and she moved from Chiapas and came to Agua Prieta to work, and she told her story about migrating. Now you notice I just said she moved to Chiapas, from Chiapas. And after she told her story about going from Chiapas up to Agua Prieta, I went up to her and I said, Miriam, you use the word migrate, and I don't, help me understand, is it a language difference? Is it just, I would consider you moved. And she said, no, I didn't move, I migrated. I had to leave. It wasn't safe. We couldn't make a living. So what I was left with, and through her story, Jean, one night we were talking in a group, and Jean asked us to kind of think about our experiences, think of a phrase, think of a word, think of something. And we talked about maybe a poem or a haiku this is what I came up with. Migrant, a life-changing events, leaving behind my homeland, forced, chased, unwanted. There's a lot more that I could tell you, and I'd be glad to, a one-on-one, but I just want you to know that you can hear all these things, but experiencing it is truly what helps understand what it means to live at the border.
I don't usually wear these t-shirts, but I bought one. And I will wear it with pride. I'm going to talk about a place in the desert. Next slide. Rick took this picture. I didn't realize there were 2 trees, but apparently there were. We sat under one of them. I'll just be in the present. We have passed through several ranch gates following a pickup truck. We are in a van. We are on a dirt road. It has been gullied in a few places. We made it. We see, unexpected for me, trees. I learned that one, at least, is an Arizona walnut, also called black walnut. Next slide. And the closer I got, I would see a large blue tank. Wait, if I were walking, I would see this shape on the land and long for its shade. And the closer I got, I would see a large blue tank resting on a wooden trestle, and closer still, perhaps, a tamale, some fruit. Next slide. We walk from our van to the tree, and I took these notes later that day. Beautiful blue sky. Keep going. One more. Beautiful blue sky, a few clouds, cooling breeze, black walnut tree, a sanctuary, 70 to 100 feet across. A lot of this sanctuary would be filled by that tree. A circle of shade, water and food, fine dirt, silt-like, water tank, picnic table, hosts in red shirts from CAPSIC, the Center of Drug Rehabilitation. 68 are rehabilitating there at its maximum, and 4 men were with us, as well as the woman director and an assistant. I guess there were 2 women. Next slide. We gathered in a circle, one of many, over the time we were in Mexico. We'd shift, make room for una más. On this first full day in the morning, we were asked to answer, where were you born? Where do you live now? Someone started. There were 11 in our delegation and 7 who accompanied us. We listened to each speaker, listened to the translation. This day, bilingual Miriam, Mark's wife, translated. Next slide. The first question was where you were born. North Americans, Rick mentioned this, are accustomed to where are you from, more than where were you born. In Mexico, the birthplace is one's identity. And I anyway, gradually embraced the importance of that as introductions continued this first day and many times during the 3 days. It was repetitious, but it was important as the guests as we being guests in the Latin culture. Next slide. Lunch. After a trek of a mile, which you'll hear about with the next speaker, to the wall and the experience of that, we came back to this walnut tree, where we had lunch of ham, cheese, lettuce, tomato sandwich, Cheetos, haven't had them in a long time, chips, I love chips, soda, water, and topped off with an apple. We carefully chose, and these lateral branches are lateral. We carefully chose a place to sit. You can see that our feet are on the ground. Amazing tree. They can be 150 years old. I don't know how old this one is. I noted as we left that place for the day, that the extra apples were tied onto a low-hanging branch in case anyone came and needed food. High branch, and I didn't have a good picture of the water tank, but the blue tank of water was full. It was and is a tree of life and a gathering place for anyone on the move in the desert. And this is my haiku of this portion. Before and after the walk to the border wall, a walnut tree sheltered.
So I did not practice with the slides. So what I'm going to do is read my little short thing and then let you just look through the slides and contemplate. So my haiku is this. The smile, I see you. Walking together, grateful. New truth emerging. Before we began our walk from the tree of life to the border, we gathered under the tree in a circle with our new friends to share our names, our birthplaces, and our work or occupation. This became a holy time as we went around the circle, sharing, laughing, smiling, perhaps a tear, and of course, handshakes and hugs at the end. We began our walk armed with water bottles, sunscreen, hats, and sturdy shoes. Trekking through creosote, desert plants that grabbed at our clothes, deep sandy arroyos and tall dry grass head high. We reached the border wall after a little over a mile. For a migrant, this would be the last of many miles of walking and or running through the dark of night. Suffering heat, dehydration, blisters, possible wounds, turned ankles, but buoyed by the hope of safety, opportunity, and possible reunion with family. We were given 2 large plastic bags for trash we found along the way. Many items we found spoke to us of the hands that had held them on this arduous journey. Our guides were 4 men, 3 from CAPSIC, the Rehabilitation Center in Agua Prieta, that is part of the Frontera de Cristo mission. They found the safest way to go and hovered over us when the terrain was difficult and when dangerous footing was hidden from sight by a thick mat of dried grass. They were anxious for us to see and feel the experience of the migrant. Bonds of mutual respect and ties, heart to heart, blossomed as we united in purpose and became one. So I'll let you look at the slides and then I'm going to read my haiku again. The smile, I see you. Walking together, grateful. New truth emerging.
Okay, so part of our mission statement was to build relationships, to invite and be invited. Actually, most of it is relational, I would say. So you can go ahead and do the next slide. Here, okay, I felt bad when I saw this picture because this is the one person I don't remember her name. Ramon's wife, Pastor Ramon's wife. Okay, well, Ruth, that's right, thank you. So she's behind a tree, right here. But she's there to welcome us to her church. And I want to say, we don't have pictures of these people, but we also met Pastor Ramon. And that's Lily of the Valley Presbyterian Church, which was, Catherine mentioned, was planted 1 year after Frontera started. So that is where we slept and ate a lot of our meals. And we had 2 cooks, Carlos and Rita. And Carlos came out after dinner to tell us a little bit about his story. So it was interesting to me how it was about relationships also. And then Rita made us breakfast twice. So we got to see her 2 days in a row. And I saw Carlos running around outside by Cafe Justo, but I didn't say hi because I was already in the van. So you can do the next slide. Here's Mark outside of the Frontera house. He is the co-director of Frontera de Cristo. This was a cool moment. There's a sign in the yard that says, it's like old and falling apart. And it says, humanitarian aid is not a crime, with a gallon of water on it. And I asked Mark on the way out to the van, this is before we had crossed at all. I was like, who is in trouble, like, for doing that? And Mark's like, oh, that's super old. But he delved into this story. And when Dan Abbott says this is the second best storyteller in the world, it's saying something, right? So Mark has a lot of stories. He has a lot of relationships. And he's able to, like, bring us into relationships with people who we didn't get to see at that time. So we heard a story of a man who was put on trial for helping migrants, and also a friend of Mark's who had a specific reaction to that. She was like, well, if he's in trouble, then they better come for me too. So Mark was always inviting us into his memories and his stories and his community. Next slide. Here we are. So we had an optional part of the trip to worship with First Douglas, go down a day early, and everybody opted into that. And it was a beautiful thing. We had a fantastic time worshiping with them and hearing from Pastor Peggy. She gave a wonderful sermon about who our heroes are and what is heroic about them. And I think for a lot of us, that set the tone for the rest of the trip. And that, I'm not gonna say it almost didn't happen. We were all fully into it, but it was an optional piece that got added on. That's not normal Frontera experience. So after her sermon and their worship, we had a fellowship hour with them when we were talking. And we heard from a little girl named Sophia. This is the church that burned down, by the way, in Douglas, because the pastor is a woman. We heard from a little girl named Sophia who can see the church from her school. And she said, every time she goes to the bathroom during her second period class, she can see the church and it makes her sad, so she runs as fast as she can, so she doesn't have to see it. And it was interesting because we kind of talked on the front end about, like, this is a, like, time to listen and learn. We're not going to do necessarily. First Douglas, though, was very much like asking for help and for community. And so in fellowship hour, after Sophia shared that, we had a discussion about, well, what is a sister church, this thing we're interested in doing? And many of us didn't know, and it was proposed, is it a big sister and a little sister? And to a lot of us from UPC, we were like, no way, absolutely not. Like, we are not better than you, we don't have more than you, we're equals, we're twins, Tom even said. And I fully appreciate where we were coming from, but at the time, it took me a while to hear where First Douglas was coming from, which was a spot of pain, a spot of needing to be picked up and held. Pastor Peggy said, we need to be held in prayer. And they're really looking for relationship from us. So here we are at lunch. After fellowship hour, the fellowship continued. We're at Chetitas. Way in the back, you can see Sue, who is on session. And behind Catherine, you can kind of see a little bit of Manny and his wife, Sylvia. We'll see more of them in the next slide. Please, thank you. So toward the end of our trip, we got invited to one of their session meetings, which Angie and Rob hosted at their home. And we had a great time. Jean joined us on Zoom. There she is in the laptop. And it was just really, so during fellowship hour, I saw their annual report laying around. And me being me, I picked it up and went through it. And I realized how similar our churches are. They have people doing so much all the time. And they're tired. And I don't know if I hope we're not as tired as they are, and as heartbroken as they are having had their church burned down. But I really felt like a kinship with them, hearing from them and reading the report of 23, which is the year the church burnt, and seeing how they're really just coming together and like man and woman powering it through. So we had a great time. We made friends. We ate dinner together. And we had a lot of discussion about what are our ways forward, what do we want to do. More to come on that. Next slide, please. So this is just our group, and I'm not sure when in the trip this was. As you can see, I'm not even there, so it's probably running late. Okay, I was getting coffee. But at one of our circles, after the journey to the border, I remember being in a circle like this, and I was mad that our friends from Katsik weren't going to be with us that next day. Like, we went on this journey, they led us, they held our hands, we ate lunch together, we laughed together. Like, for me, the experience at the wall was playing, and I wasn't expecting that. So we, like, in my mind and my heart, we became like best friends, and then they were gone forever. Not really forever, but we weren't going to see them again. And that was hard for me. But we did have these regular debriefs, going over how we were feeling and sharing as a group. Next slide. Okay, so here I am getting coffee later. That's Hoka, who has been here to preach before. She and Mark are equals, so she is the Agua Prieta side director. And we had just had a Bible study, and it was really beautiful to hear they made sure we heard equally from Frontera staff and from our delegation. And so that was really special, and I think we heard a lot of things that we needed to hear, and that we were just new perspectives. So talking about the work that was before us. Next slide. Here's David and Dan. David works with Frontera. He was with us like basically everywhere. So as much as, like, that was, as devastated as I was that Katsik wasn't going to be with us the next day, David went with us basically everywhere. So that was really nice. And as you can see, he is a wonderful person, just like Dan. We have a great time. Next slide, please. Here is one of, well, actually two of the Cacique members. This is Raul. In the background, there's Marisol, who made our sandwiches. Raul is breaking walnuts and sharing them with us. So that was our very first introduction to Cacique. They're sharing the fruit of the tree of life with us, literally. And that was really special. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that's Miriam, who was also with us. I would say our four main people were Miriam, David, who is in the hoodie, and then Mark and Hoka were with us all the time. And then in the red, that's Raul again. And then in the black hoodie is Laura, who is running Cacique. And devastatingly, Laura and Raul were not with us after this day. Next slide, please. And then here we are. This was our last stop. That's Caleb sharing some manzanitas, little super tiny apples from a tree that's growing in Dougla Prieta Trabaja. And he made sure everybody got to try them, and they were delicious. He was like sharing his favorite candy with us. It was really cute. And then in this other picture, that's Miriam in the scarf again, with us everywhere. And Mati is in the blue shirt. And she was the one who gave us the whole rundown. I think she's leading Dougla Prieta Trabaja. So we had a really nice time. They made us a fantastic lunch of tostadas and compote, which was soup. And then we got a tour. So it was a great send-off, and it was really nice. I'm glad we got to see that. Next slide, please. Here is Hoka again, with us everywhere. And then that's Bridic, who is at the Migrant Resource Center. So we're literally right next to the border in this building, right next to the port of entry. And Bridic told us a lot about like the realities of migrating. To me, this center was really interesting because it was a lot of, I would say, like harm reduction. And I was asking questions of like, they're not giving instructions, do it this way, one way or the other. Like, don't go, do go with them, come with us. It was like giving people information to keep them safe and keep them alive, from what I understood. And Bridic here, when she finds people who are looking for shelter, sends them down to Kami, the shelter. And so it's the connection. So like the people we were meeting were all in relationship with each other. The organizations were in relationship with each other. And it was really interesting to see how they all worked in unison. So who we don't have a photo of is Beto, who works at Kami. And he, for me, was a big hero. I mean, everybody we met was. But Beto specifically has had run-ins with the organized crime and had a few scary moments. Miriam told us one story where he had a run-in with them. He told us a completely different story. And we were able to ask how he finds his strength. And he told us he sees the humanity in everybody's face. And that's what keeps him going, is knowing that God loves them. Where in the past, he would see people suffering and ask himself, why doesn't God love them? He now can see them and realize God loves them in this situation, and that's his call to action.
So next slide. So this is the logistics. So where they're worshiping now is in a room there. So, because their church is burned. So that was where we were. And it was full with us, and the people there was full. And everything, I have a brochure. So there's two ministers, co-pastors, Reverend Peggy Christensen and Reverend Hoka Gallegos. Now, Hoka couldn't be there because she's lost her visa. So she's in the process of getting a new one, but she couldn't be there. So everything is in Spanish and English. They would start out in English, and then Peggy would say it in Spanish. Every hymn would be either English first and then Spanish, and then the third verse would be whatever language you wanted to sing in. Then sometimes they start in Spanish first, so it was very equal as far as the languages. And Peggy also played the keyboard, so she had a lot on her plate, translating and playing. So you might think this might be distracting, going back and forth with the languages, but actually we all found it very spiritual. It was a thin place, because if you think of all these people together, praying, sharing, and singing, 2 cultures, this is God's kingdom. So I think, is there any more slides? So that was on the wall. Come, O Lord, bless us now as we gather together. May our lives glow with peace, come with love and surround us, friendship and love. May they bloom and grow forever. Bless the food, bless our friends, bless all people forever.
You can almost tell by the rhythm of the words.
Right. Yeah.
That's what we would sing as our prayer before any meal or
Oh.
anything like that. That's what we would sing.
So Jean was saying that's the prayer they would sing before any meal or any gathering at the church.
And it survived the fire.
Yes, survive the fire. So next slide. So that's, yeah. Keep going. Next slide. So there's these walls that are left, the stone walls, and they're being held up by beams. You can see the beams on the side. Next slide. Okay, next slide. So I don't know if you all know the story of this gentleman who burned 2 churches, set them both on fire. The Presbyterian church, because we had a woman pastor, and then the Episcopal church, and I might have been a gay pastor. So the Episcopal church is totally gone. There's an empty lot there. It's totally gone. And then he was arrested. So, yeah, in prison. But that was another thing. Out of this hate, then here we were, sharing in love. So we're still going.
Presente. A word said about 180 times with passion every Tuesday evening in Douglas as they did their Healing Our Borders prayer vigil. The emotional and physical moving vigil honors and acknowledges those migrants who died in Cochise County as they attempted to migrate to the U.S. So it struck me as we're going, all other activities were sort of for the living. This is for those who died, and we wanted to remember them. This remembrance began in December 2000 as a way to acknowledge the human beings who often died alone, away from family and friends. It's an interfaith group initiated by a Catholic priest, Father Bob Carney, in conjunction with the Sisters of Notre Dame and the people from, I just went blank, Fondas, yes, Frontera. And they're the ones that are continuing it now. And they lead it along with the Mennonite people who are also involved. So they get information about how many people have died in Cochise County. And at this point, it's up to about 600 people. So they take the information that they have and they make these white crosses and put the names on them if they have the names. If not, it's no identification. And if they have the information of the person's date of birth and the date they found the remains. And so we line up for this about a quarter-mile walk down Pan American Avenue, starting at a park in 5th Street down to the border. We do it single file, and everybody's sort of about 6 feet apart. So you're walking down the sidewalk alongside probably the busiest street, because it's going to the border. And so you walk, you have your cross. When it's your turn, you turn around and face the people that are walking behind you, hold up the cross, say the person's name, and then everybody together says, "Presente." And then you put the cross down on the curb, and then you wait to get back in line, and then that continues down to the border. And they bring only about a third of the crosses they have each week. So that's about 180. And so then you can go to the next slide. And so when they get to the end, we form a circle. And they focus on three people that have passed, and they have crosses. So a person in the circle will hold it, say the person's name, then they'll take it and put it down. So at this point, all three have been acknowledged. But after each one, if someone in the community knows something about that person, they will share all that information. And if there is nothing, they basically say that. And then we say prayers. Prayers for those who died, prayers for their family, prayers for others that may be coming, others we probably don't know who died. And so then we end it. Go to the next one. And that was on the US side. On the Mexican side, the border wall has murals. Ours is just brown. So this actually mural, I don't know if you can read it, but on the bottom says, "Don't forget." So they do it sort of daily. If someone's there, you see it, you can remember whoever. Next slide, please. And this is a memorial for a person, that they just crop up, put a cross, and somebody brings flowers every day, it looks like. Catherine and Bianca were taking it in. So that, again, is on the Mexican side. Well, maybe the US side. Mexico, maybe as far as where the borderline was, because we kind of went in, but it was on the Mexican side. Next slide, please. And so this shows you how when the crosses are put on the curbs. And then at the end of the walk, we pile them up into threes, and then someone from Frontera comes and picks them up and puts them in the cart.
Mine is a reflection of on how important these people are to us. Wednesday morning, we were guests at their Frontera de Cristo meeting at Café Justo. There was a scripture reading from Mark 13, which is a set of verses that contains a lot about cycles. And we at UPC have and do help the mission of Frontera de Cristo. At this meeting, it hit me, as you can tell, how the cycle had come around for them to help us. On the trip to the wall, they acted as point, guiding us to the wall. They would give us a hand up, the Arroyo Bank, or a hand down, which I found very helpful. And their experience and fullness of faith, they're so full. Their experience and fullness of faith now, with the changes coming on this side of the border, enable them to be the point again. I don't know why. It hits me so hard. Maybe you can help me. Enables them to be the point for us again, inspiring us as we enter this dangerous future.
I'm to talk about weekly devotions and a weekly meeting that is held. I also want to suggest, and especially in reflection and listening to Tom, many people feel that what is going on our borders is the principal civil rights action of our time. What is going on to children and to adults is what is so important for all of us to know about. Every Wednesday, do I have a slide? They were probably hoping I wouldn't, so I wouldn't talk much. Inspiration, oh.
Sorry, Rick's trying to tell me the exact same thing.
Is that this one? Keep going, okay. Every Wednesday, and first of all, I want to say to get people to work together, you really need some structure to this system. If you get everybody going to the wall on Tuesday nights and nobody on Thursday, it really imbalances what is being attempted. So every Wednesday morning, the principal figures in Frontera gather in the upstairs meeting room of Cafe Justo for what can only be described as a worship, prayer meeting, business meeting, lectio divina, coffee get-together. It is really a little bit of all of those. Attendance is highly recommended. Visitors who are visiting Frontera, whether they speak Spanish or not, are strongly invited to attend. That's usually the second question they ask when Tom and Hoka come. Oh, you can come. Can you come on Wednesday? And so I think that's a real important piece of sharing their vision. Translation is provided usually by a bilingual Frontera person who whispers in your ear, the English translation. So it would be better for people like me to be able to understand Spanish, but they really take that into account. When visitors are in attendance, introductions are done. As we all realized, there were probably maybe a dozen times we introduced ourselves using our name, where we were born, the church that we represented, and that could be different, obviously, from where we were born. Scriptures are read in both English and Spanish. Excuse me. Songs are sung. Usually 3 songs that would be recognized by many of you from the conservative Protestant world. They're kind of camp meeting songs, some of them. And they're really sung. Usually if you've heard Hoka sing, you know what real singing is about. If you don't know Spanish, you are encouraged to find the song on your iPhone and follow along as best you can. Participants are encouraged to share what they are grateful for and what they are concerned about. I'm going to call on Catherine. Tell us the Spanish translations of being grateful for.
Oh, you mean what you say?
What'd you say?
Say, damos a, oh Dios, vamos a. Escúchanos is the listen, hear us, God. So escúchanos, oh Dios, we are grateful, God. Damos a, we give thanks. Damos gracias, Dios.
So for people with skills, you remember that. I don't have the skills, but really quickly you pick that up. This offering up of prayers is a strong part of the meeting. An individual's offering up can leave people in tears and with a warm embrace. if a participant doesn't know Spanish, they're encouraged to share what is on their hearts in the language that they come with, and the offering of concern is translated from there. After the reflections are completed, people replenish their cafe gusto. We got a new load in, by the way, and embark on the business of the meeting. It's a powerful thing, and I think, and this will be hard for me to, and I'll keep it short, but in offering up our concerns, a year or two ago, my grandson, Jude, was in the hospital. And for those of you that know me know that Jude has autism as well as Down syndrome. And I described my concern for Jude, and immediately after, I was wrapped in the embrace of a participant. So there's business and there's business.
No, you did not. We all did. It's hard to put into a few words what our experience was. And it's our hope that all of you can recognize just this much, what a joy and a privilege, an emotional sharing that this experience was. And we 11, believe that there's more to come. So that's what this is about. Questions and answers. It said siblings in Christ. Pastor Peggy and I talked maybe a year and a half, when I was there, about the opportunities that might exist for Frontera de Cristo to serve to put more time in on the northern side of the border, and then the church burned, and they were left without struggling for vision and struggling for next steps, and how do we need to redefine? It's like getting a new pastor, only you have to get a new building. I mean, it just was really a lot of challenge was going on, and it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to see that going on for them. And so right around that time, Peggy and I started talking about, is there such a thing as a sister church? I mean, could we be in relationship somehow with that church? This is a different presbytery here in Arizona, same state. But so we started just sort of noodling on that idea, and I've not put it away. And the reason that first day when we went down was like optional, I just shared, well, Dan and I are going to go down a day early because we want to worship with First Pres, and then meet with them afterwards in a social hour. So everybody goes, I want to go. I mean, the entire group, to a person, all wanted to go along. I was so excited. And then Peggy calls, and they had session there, which is what, how many people? 5 people. Session had decided, oh, well, if Dan and Catherine are coming, then after it's fellowship hour, we'll take them out to lunch. Right, so she calls and goes, 11 people? So it was a bit overwhelming, and we had to kind of reconfigure. But we already had on the schedule meeting them for dinner on Tuesday night. And that was where we spent some time, having met each other, gotten comfortable a little bit. We started talking about, what does it mean to be in relationship, to be a sibling? What does that look like for us? It turns out, Conrad Rocha, I always want to say Rocha. Conrad, is it Rocha? Rocha said all of the Senate execs were there at the same time we were. And so we saw him in a couple of different locations, and he goes, oh, I think that's great, just be in relationship. And so we started just talking relationship. There are rules, decent and in order, that we can check out and figure out what we need to do. Ricky, of course, was immediately looking that up. And so there are ways to formalize a relationship with another church, like a sibling. But we don't have to, we can't. I mean, this is on the very front end. So you saw a bunch of bags. One of the first things that came up is that they're going to be giving out food and much needed coats in Douglas. And so just a small group of us said okay, and we came up with, 4 or 5 bags. The problem is, of course, that they're 4 hours away by car. And so Nathalie is driving halfway down because she goes down every week. And then somebody who has a doctor's appointment is going to come in and pick up the coats and take them back, and they're going to give them away this next week. So we're figuring out that there are ways to figure things out, is sort of what it's about. And so that's kind of on the front end. I'm planting a little seed. We have no permission from Session. This is just a seed that was, an idea that started germinating, and we all got very excited about it. We were very moved by the members of the church because they do feel like us. They also pointed out we are very different here because we're in the borderlands. We have a lot to learn from them as well. So I think that's it. We really don't have time for Q&A, but if you guys want to stay, we can do it. I don't know what people want to do. What time is it, Jean? 12:15. But the 11, and Al's not here, and he added so much. So please tell him we miss him today because he added so much. And then we couldn't have Arlene with us for reasons, personal reasons. She couldn't join us, and she was part of the getting ready to go. So it would have been 12. It was really, we loved it, and we want to share. So stay tuned, right, for the next one. I'm sorry, say that again? Tout the global market. The global market is coming. It's next week, right? Next Sunday. So bring your wallets. I also have some pins. To migrate is not a crime. To migrate is not a crime. It's really cool. And here's another one that says, to migrate or to stay is a freedom of choice. So anyway, we have some pins. It's in Spanish. So when you wear it, nobody will know what you're saying, right?